South Africa's players spent the days before this World Cup stuck waiting on visas, unable to even reach their own training base. 3 weeks later, their tournament is over, eliminated in the round of 32 by Canada. But here's the part that hasn't gone away. While Bafana were fighting travel chaos just to show up, two of Europe's biggest footballing nations were fighting a very different battle back home, one aimed directly at how this entire World Cup is being run. Right now, as the knockout rounds tighten and the final in New Jersey gets closer, there's a quiet but growing resistance building against FIFA itself. Lawmakers in London have floated treating the United States the way football once treated Russia. Politicians in Paris have openly called for matches to be pulled off American soil completely, and South Africa's own World Cup experience became a real-world example of exactly what fans and federations were worried about before a ball was even kicked. So what's actually going on between these countries and football's governing body? And what does it actually mean for the rest of this tournament? Let's get into it. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel breaks down every major World Cup story as it happens. No fluff, just what's actually going on and why it matters. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. To understand where this pressure is coming from, you have to rewind a little. This is the first World Cup ever hosted across 3 countries at once, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, and the first with 48 teams instead of 32. That alone made logistics harder than any tournament in history. But the bigger complications showed up outside football entirely. Immigration and travel policy under the current U.S. administration collided head-on with the reality of hosting the biggest sporting event on the planet. A travel ban affecting citizens of 39 countries, several of which had teams competing, made it extremely difficult for ordinary fans from those nations to even apply for entry, let alone attend a match. On top of that, FIFA and U.S. officials introduced a visa bond program that initially required fans from 5 African countries to pay deposits of up to $15,000 just to enter the country. That requirement was quietly suspended in May for fans who already held match tickets, but by then, the damage to FIFA's image with those federations had already been done. By January this year, tensions around U.S. foreign policy, including talk of territorial disputes involving Greenland, had already pushed some European politicians to start openly discussing a boycott. That's the environment this tournament was born into, long before the opening whistle in Mexico City. If you're finding this useful, this is exactly the kind of story we break down in full detail every week. Subscribing helps this channel keep covering it properly right through to the final.
Here's where things get interesting. Let's start with the travel and logistics side because this is where the pressure has been most visible and most personal. South Africa's saga became the clearest example. Their flight out of Johannesburg was delayed because a group of players and technical staff still hadn't had their visas processed by the U.S. Embassy, with some staff visas reportedly declined outright. The team's own sports minister publicly said the situation made the squad look foolish and demanded answers from the Football Association about how it happened. It was eventually resolved, and the team departed a day later than planned. But it meant Bafana walked into their tournament against co-host Mexico, already dealing with the distraction they never asked for. They weren't alone. A Somali referee, set to become the first ever Somali official at a World Cup, was denied entry in Miami and had to return home without taking charge of a single match, despite being recognized as the top referee in Africa the previous year. The International Sports Press Association wrote directly to FIFA, asking it to intervene after several accredited journalists, many from Iranian and African outlets, were denied entry or issued only single-use visas that stranded them if their assignment took them across borders during the tournament. Fans from Morocco reported having tickets in hand and visas rejected without explanation. Scottish supporters spoke publicly about approvals being revoked before they'd even left home. None of these are official withdrawals or bans on entire nations, but taken together, they paint a picture of a tournament where simply getting through the door has become its own competition, separate from the football. This matters because a World Cup is supposed to be the one event where the whole footballing world gets to show up. When getting a visa becomes as uncertain as a penalty shootout, that promise starts to look shakier with every passing round. Quick reminder, if you're enjoying this breakdown, tapping subscribe genuinely helps more people find these videos, and it takes about 2 seconds. But that's only part of the story. The other angle here is political, and it's been building for months, well before South Africa's visa issue ever made headlines. In the UK, a Conservative Member of Parliament stood up in the House of Commons and suggested England, Scotland, and Wales should consider boycotting the tournament entirely, framing it as a way to pressure the current US administration. Separately, a group of UK lawmakers went further, formally calling on FIFA to exclude the United States from the competition altogether, drawing a direct comparison to how Russia was excluded from international football following the invasion of Ukraine. In France, a member of parliament from a left-wing party publicly urged the French Federation to consider a boycott and suggested the entire tournament could theoretically be shifted to be played only across Canada and Mexico. Germany saw a similar conversation, with a vice president of its football federation comparing the moment to Cold War-era Olympic boycotts and asking, in his words, whether the threat now might be even greater than it was then. The bigger issue is that none of this has actually translated into a real withdrawal. No federation has pulled its team. It's worth remembering that a very similar wave of criticism surrounded the human rights record in Qatar back in 2022, and that outrage never turned into any large-scale boycott either. Talk and action have historically stayed pretty far apart in football politics.
Part of why FIFA has faced so much scrutiny is its own closeness to the current U.S. administration. FIFA President Gianni Infantino awarded the sitting U.S. president a specially created FIFA Peace Prize late last year, and the organization opened an office inside Trump Tower in New York. For critics in European parliaments, that relationship is exactly why they don't trust FIFA to push back on visa and immigration issues affecting their own players, staff, and fans. If you want to keep following how this plays out as the knockout rounds continue, subscribing is honestly the easiest way to stay updated without missing anything. Now, think about what all of this actually looks like for the people living through it, rather than just the politicians talking about it. For South African players, it meant walking into a World Cup already exhausted by a visa scandal before facing a hostile crowd in Mexico City. For fans from banned or restricted countries, it's meant holding a valid match ticket that simply cannot get them through a border. For journalists and even match officials, it's meant assignments canceled at the airport, career milestones lost to paperwork rather than performance. Then there's the ticket pricing situation, which has become its own separate storm entirely. FIFA introduced dynamic pricing for the first time in World Cup history, and it raised prices on more than 90 of the tournament's 104 matches between October and April, with the 3 main ticket categories climbing by an average of 34%. Partway through sales, FIFA introduced new premium zones inside existing categories, meaning fans who had already paid for what they thought were prime seats were quietly shifted to worse ones, sometimes behind the goals, without being told in advance. That's now drawn formal investigations from attorneys general in New York, New Jersey, California, and Texas, looking into whether fans were misled about pricing and seating. Resale prices for the July 19th final at MetLife Stadium peaked at around $12,500 in late June, before easing back toward roughly $10,000. Even with the tournament setting an all-time World Cup attendance record earlier this summer, there's genuine concern that some of the remaining knockout matches could see empty seats simply because ordinary fans have been priced out of their own tournament. If this kind of detail is what you come here for, subscribing means you won't have to go searching for it next time. It'll just show up. So, where does this actually go from here? Best case, the political noise stays exactly that, noise. The remaining knockout matches play out without further disruption, and the ticket pricing investigations continue quietly in the background until after the final on July 19th. That's honestly the most likely outcome, given how little traction previous boycott talk has ever gained in football history. Worst realistic case, another federation runs into the kind of visa chaos South Africa experienced, this time affecting a team still alive in the competition. Or new details from the Attorney General's subpoenas become public mid-tournament and reignite the ticket pricing anger right as the biggest matches are being played. Either way, some believe this tournament could end up shaping how future hosts are chosen and how national federations negotiate travel guarantees before ever agreeing to send a team. The next World Cup, in 2030, co-hosted across Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, will look completely different logistically, but the political precedent being set right now about how much governing bodies are expected to push back on their own host nations may end up outlasting this tournament entirely. So, to bring it all together, South Africa's federation lived through a visa nightmare before their tournament even began. UK and French politicians have spent months openly floating boycotts and exclusions aimed at the US as host, and FIFA's own ticket pricing has landed it under investigation in 4 American states, all while the football itself keeps producing incredible knockout stage drama. What do you think actually has the biggest lasting impact here? The visa and travel chaos, the political pressure from Europe, or the ticket pricing scandal? And do you think any federation could still pull out before that final on July 19th? Drop your prediction in the comments.